I was adjusting my veil in the bridal suite mirror when my phone buzzed with a text from the florist, confirming delivery times for tomorrow's ceremony. Tomorrow. The word felt surreal. After 8 months of planning, countless venue visits, and more family dinners than I could count, I would finally marry Daniel Hayes, the man who'd changed everything about how I saw love and partnership. I walked toward the suite's balcony to catch some air, my champagne glass still full, when I heard voices drifting up from the courtyard below. My parents. They must have stepped outside during the rehearsal dinner for privacy, not realizing the acoustics of the Torres estate carried sound directly to the second-floor balcony. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What I heard next turned my blood to ice. My mother Patricia's voice, sharp and calculated, cut through the evening air. The photographer knows exactly when to snap the pictures. Right when Vincent reads the letter. Everyone will see her face when she realizes what's happening. My father's response was quieter, uncertain. Are we sure about this, Patricia? It seems extreme. She's our daughter. Extreme? My mother's laugh was brittle. She's about to tie herself to a contractor's son from Maple Grove. This isn't extreme, Vincent. This is necessary intervention. If humiliation is what it takes to wake her up before she ruins the Torres name, then so be it. I pressed myself against the wall, phone clutched in trembling hands. My thumb found the voice recorder app, hitting record just as my mother continued laying out their plan in meticulous detail. The fake background check revealing manufactured scandals about Daniel. The surprise speech my father would give, timed precisely during the first dance. The coordinator they'd bribed to ensure maximum audience attention. Even the social media strategy, with my mother's society friends positioned to capture and share every moment of my humiliation across every platform that mattered in Riverside's elite circles. My wedding. The day I'd dreamed about since Daniel proposed on the pier at sunset, the ring his grandmother had worn for 50 years catching the last light of day. My parents weren't just planning to object. They were orchestrating a calculated destruction, a public spectacle designed to force me to abandon Daniel at the altar while ensuring everyone in our social sphere witnessed the Torres family putting their wayward daughter back in her place. The worst part was hearing my father's resigned agreement, his weak protests dissolving under my mother's insistence that this was for my own good, for the family's reputation, for the preservation of everything the Torres name represented in Riverside. I stood on that balcony for another 10 minutes, recording every word as they refined their timeline, confirmed their conspirators, and laughed about how I'd eventually thank them when I came to my senses and married someone appropriate. Someone from Willow Heights. Someone whose father belonged to Riverside Oaks Country Club. Someone who wasn't Daniel Hayes, the genuine, kind, brilliant man I loved more than my own reflection in my parents' gilded mirrors. When they finally went back inside, I stayed frozen, watching the string lights twinkle over the garden where I'd played as a child, where I'd trusted these people to want my happiness. The recording sat heavy in my phone, proof of a betrayal so profound it rewrote every memory I had of family loyalty. My mother had taught me about grace under pressure, about strategic thinking, about never letting anyone see you sweat. She'd trained me well. Too well. Because in that moment, standing in my rehearsal dress with their conspiracy captured in digital form, I realized something crystalline and cold. If they wanted a show, I'd give them one. But the humiliation they'd planned for me and Daniel would become something entirely different. They'd taught me every rule of their social warfare. Now I'd use those weapons against them. My name is Maya Torres, and this is the story of how I turned my parents' plot into their own reckoning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The rehearsal dinner ended with toasts and laughter that felt like acid in my throat. I smiled through dessert, hugged my mother when she squeezed my shoulder and whispered about tomorrow being perfect, and kissed my father's cheek when he slipped me an envelope he claimed contained a sentimental letter to read before the ceremony. That envelope. The one he'd mentioned on the balcony. The one filled with lies designed to shatter me in front of 200 guests. I tucked it into my clutch and excused myself early, claiming wedding day jitters and needing beauty sleep. Daniel walked me to my car, his hand warm against the small of my back. You okay? You seem distant. I forced brightness into my voice. Just overwhelmed. Good, overwhelmed. Tomorrow we start forever. He kissed my forehead, that gentle gesture that had made me fall for him in the first place, back when he'd been the project manager renovating my office building and I'd been the marketing executive who kept finding excuses to visit the construction site. Get some rest, Maya. Tomorrow, you become Mrs. Hayes. The pride in his voice nearly broke me. His parents had saved for 2 years to help pay for the wedding, despite my protests. Linda Hayes had sewn details into my veil by hand. Robert Hayes had built us a custom arbor for the ceremony. They'd welcomed me into their modest home with more genuine warmth than I'd ever felt in the Torres estate's marble foyers. And my parents were planning to humiliate them all. To expose fake scandals. To imply Daniel was a gold digger, a fraud, someone using me for access to Torres money. The recording played again in my car as I drove, not to my apartment, but to Olivia's place across town. My best friend since college, the maid of honor who'd stood by me through every family drama, every clash with Patricia's impossible standards, every moment when I doubted whether breaking free from my parents' expectations was worth the constant warfare. She opened the door in pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without questions. I played her the recording. All 15 minutes of it. Patricia's voice outlining each calculated humiliation. Vincent's weak objections. The timing, the photography, the social media strategy. The fake letter. The bribed vendors. The society friends positioned as amplifiers. Everything. Olivia's expression transformed from confusion to horror to something harder. Something that looked like the rage I felt burning in my own chest. Those absolute monsters. We're calling it off. We're eloping tonight. You don't have to face this. But I wasn't running. For the first time in my 27 years of managing Patricia Torres's disappointment, of trying to be the daughter worthy of the Torres name, of smoothing over every conflict and absorbing every criticism, I wasn't interested in avoiding confrontation. I was interested in war. No. My voice was steady, clear. We're not calling anything off. We're going to let them execute their plan exactly as they've designed it. And then we're going to destroy them with it. Olivia stared at me like I'd suggested skydiving without a parachute. Maya, you can't seriously want to go through with a public humiliation just to get revenge. I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app, and played it again. This time, I watched Olivia's face as my mother's words spilled out, each sentence a fresh betrayal. This isn't just about revenge. This is about every person they've ever done this to. Every relationship they've sabotaged. Every time they've used their money and status to crush someone who didn't meet their standards. I thought about my cousin Brianna, whose engagement to a teacher had ended mysteriously after a devastating rumor campaign. About Uncle Carlos, exiled from family events after refusing to join my father's business. About every working-class vendor, every scholarship student, every person my parents had treated as less than human because they lacked the right pedigree. If I run, they win. They'll do this to someone else, at some other wedding, in some other way. But if I let them show everyone exactly who they are, if I document everything and expose it all, maybe it stops. Maybe people finally see what Patricia and Vincent Torres really are behind the charity galas and country club memberships. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she opened her laptop. Okay. Tell me everything they said. Every detail. Every vendor they mentioned bribing. Every timeline marker. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. We worked until sunrise, building our counter operation. Olivia, who ran a tech startup and understood digital warfare better than anyone I knew, created a plan that was elegant in its simplicity. We wouldn't stop my parents. We'd let them proceed exactly as planned. But we'd capture everything, document every moment, and then we'd reveal not just their conspiracy, but the deeper secrets I'd always known existed beneath the Torres family's polished surface. The affairs. The financial manipulation. The fake credentials my mother used in her nonprofit work. The tax fraud. The NDAs my father had paid to silence former business partners. All of it. My parents had taught me that reputation was everything in their world. They'd built their entire existence on the foundation of how things appeared, not how they actually were. Tomorrow, at my wedding, I'd use their own weapons against them. The photography they'd arranged would capture their humiliation instead of mine. The social media amplification would spread their exposure, not my shame. The audience they'd assembled would witness the Torres family's fall from grace, not Maya Torres's broken heart. I drove home as the sun rose over Riverside, my wedding just hours away. The dress hung in my closet, perfect and untouched. The envelope from my father sat on my dresser, its poison waiting to be deployed. And in my phone, backed up to 3 separate cloud services, the recording that would change everything. My parents wanted a show. They'd get one. Just not the one they'd planned. The morning of my wedding arrived with deceptive sunshine streaming through my apartment windows. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'd slept maybe 2 hours, the rest of the night spent with Olivia finalizing our strategy. My phone sat on the bathroom counter as I showered, the recording safely uploaded to multiple locations, each backup an insurance policy against my parents' carefully constructed world. Daniel had texted at 6 a.m., something sweet about counting down the hours until I walked down the aisle. The guilt twisted in my stomach. He had no idea what was coming. Neither did his parents, those kind people who'd treated me like the daughter they'd always wanted, who'd scraped together savings to contribute to a wedding my parents could have funded without blinking. Olivia arrived at 8 with coffee and a calm determination that steadied my shaking hands. She'd brought something else too. A tiny wireless microphone, the kind used for presentation videos at her tech company. This clips inside your dress. Everything you say, everything said near you, records directly to a secure server. If your parents try anything beyond what we already know, we'll have it. I stared at the device, smaller than my thumb. This felt like crossing a line into territory I'd never imagined occupying. Wearing a wire to my own wedding. Recording my parents without their knowledge. Preparing to publicly expose family secrets that would ripple through Riverside's social circles for years. Then I remembered my mother's laugh on that recording. The casual cruelty in her voice as she described timing my humiliation for maximum impact. The way she discussed Daniel like he was a pest to be exterminated rather than the man I loved. I clipped the microphone into place. Olivia helped me into the wedding dress, her hands steady where mine trembled. The gown was everything I'd dreamed of, layers of silk and lace that had taken 6 fittings to perfect. My mother had complained about the cost despite the Torres family wealth, suggesting I was being frivolous, that I should save money for the marriage itself. Now I understood. She'd never expected this wedding to happen. Every fitting, every deposit, every planning session had been theater to her, a game she was playing while plotting the real finale. My hair and makeup team arrived at 9, chattering happily about the ceremony, about how romantic the venue looked, about what a beautiful couple Daniel and I made. I smiled and nodded, let them work their magic while Olivia sat in the corner, laptop open, monitoring the various camera feeds we'd quietly arranged. The wedding planner, Jasmine Wu, had proven unexpectedly valuable when I'd called her at midnight with a carefully edited version of the situation. I'd told her my parents were planning a surprise that might disrupt the ceremony, that I needed her help ensuring the day went smoothly despite their interference. What I hadn't mentioned was that I wanted their surprise to proceed exactly as planned. Jasmine had connections throughout Riverside's event industry. Within hours, she'd confirmed that my parents had indeed bribed the photographer, slipped money to the DJ, and even attempted to pay off the videographer. But Jasmine had relationships with these vendors that superseded my parents' cash. The photographer agreed to document everything, including whatever chaos my parents unleashed. The videographer promised multiple camera angles. The DJ would follow my cues, not my father's. Piece by piece, we'd turned my parents' conspiracy into our own elaborate trap. They thought they controlled the stage. They had no idea the performance had been rewritten. Uncle Carlos called at 10, his gravelly voice tight with concern. Maya, I heard some things. Your mother talking to her sister about today. About plans. You need to know that whatever they're doing, it's not about you. It's about control. It's always been about control. I'd always loved Uncle Carlos, the black sheep who'd chosen to open a modest restaurant instead of joining the family business, who'd married for love instead of status, who'd been systematically frozen out of Torres family events for refusing to play by Patricia's rules. What did you hear? I asked, putting him on speaker so Olivia could listen. Your mother's planning something during the reception. Something public. She wants to embarrass you into calling off the marriage. His voice cracked slightly. I've seen her do this before, Mija. To your cousin Brianna. To others. She manufactures situations where the only escape is surrender, and then she positions herself as the reasonable one trying to save you from yourself. I know. I said quietly. I heard her planning it. There was a long pause. Then what are you going to do? Fight back. Another pause, longer this time. Then his laugh, surprised and warm. Good. It's about time someone in this family stood up to Patricia Torres. Whatever you need, I'm here. You need a witness? A place to hide after? You need someone to accidentally spill wine on your mother's dress? Say the word. His offer made something tight in my chest loosen slightly. The Torres family had always operated on isolation, on making sure anyone who challenged Patricia and Vincent felt alone, unsupported, convinced that resistance was futile. But I wasn't alone. I had Olivia, who'd cancelled her entire weekend to help coordinate this counter-operation. I had Jasmine, who'd risked her professional relationships to ensure the vendors remained loyal to me rather than my parents' bribes. I had Uncle Carlos, ready to stand as witness to whatever unfolded. And I had Daniel, who still knew nothing about any of this, who was probably at his parents' house right now, getting ready with his groomsmen, believing today would be the happiest day of our lives. The guilt returned, sharper this time. Daniel deserved to know what was coming. Deserved to prepare, to decide if he wanted to be part of this confrontation. But telling him risked everything. Daniel was honest to his core, incapable of the kind of strategic deception this plan required. If he knew, it would show on his face. My parents would sense something was wrong, might adjust their plans, might call everything off and regroup for another attack at another time. No, this had to happen today, with Daniel unaware, with my parents confident in their control of the narrative. I'd apologize later. Spend years making it up to him if necessary. But today, I needed him to be genuinely surprised, genuinely hurt by my father's letter, genuinely confused by the chaos my parents would unleash. His authentic reactions would make their cruelty undeniable. Olivia finished setting up the backup recordings, closed her laptop with a decisive click. Everything's live. Every camera angle is streaming to secure storage. The microphone is active. Whatever happens today, we'll have documentation from multiple sources. She met my eyes in the mirror, her expression serious. Last chance to back out. We can still grab Daniel, hit the courthouse, file for a restraining order against your parents. This doesn't have to be nuclear. But it did. Not just for me, but for every person my parents had ever crushed under the weight of their manufactured propriety. For Brianna, whose engagement had crumbled under the pressure of rumors nobody could trace back to Patricia but everyone knew she'd orchestrated. For Uncle Carlos, excluded from his own family for the crime of choosing authenticity over appearance. For Daniel's parents, about to be humiliated in front of strangers for having the audacity to be working class and proud. The limousine arrived at 11 to transport me to the Riverside Grand Hotel. My mother had insisted on this particular car service, on this specific route through downtown where people would see the bride en route to her wedding. Another detail that had seemed like parental involvement in wedding planning now revealed itself as stage management. Patricia Torres wanted witnesses to every moment, wanted the entire city of Riverside watching as the Torres family demonstrated their power. She'd get her witnesses. Just not the story she'd written. The hotel ballroom took my breath away despite everything. Jasmine and her team had transformed the space into something magical, with flowers cascading from the ceiling, lights that made everything glow with warmth, and the custom arbor Robert Hayes had built standing at the altar like a promise of home and safety and love. My bridesmaids were already there, laughing and taking photos, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering. I joined them, smiled for the cameras, let them fuss over my dress and veil. Through the doorway, I could see guests beginning to arrive. My parents' society friends, elegant in designer outfits, air-kissing and networking even at a wedding. Daniel's family and friends, more casually dressed, looking slightly overwhelmed by the opulence but genuine in their excitement. Two worlds colliding, exactly as my parents had feared. Exactly what they were here to prevent. Patricia Torres swept into the bridal suite at noon, already dressed for battle in a champagne gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She kissed my cheek, her perfume overwhelming, her smile perfect and empty. "You look beautiful, darling. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned." The threat in those words was unmistakable to anyone who knew how to listen. She thought I was oblivious, still the compliant daughter who'd absorbed criticism and adjusted behavior to match her standards. She had no idea I'd spent the last 16 hours building a counter-strike that would dismantle everything she'd constructed. "Thank you, Mother." I matched her smile, her tone. "I'm so grateful you and Father have been so involved in planning this day. It means everything to me." The lie tasted like copper, but I delivered it flawlessly. Patricia had trained me well in the art of performing emotion while feeling nothing. Now I'd use those lessons against her. She squeezed my hand, already turning to leave, to take her position in the front row where she could watch her carefully orchestrated destruction unfold. "I'll see you at the altar, Maya. Today changes everything." She had no idea how right she was. The ceremony began at 2 p.m. sharp, the string quartet playing as guests settled into their seats. I stood in the preparation room, bouquet trembling in my hands, watching through a crack in the door as my parents took their positions. Patricia sat in the front row, posture immaculate, phone discreetly angled to capture what she believed would be my imminent collapse. Vincent stood near the entrance, the envelope containing their fabricated evidence tucked into his jacket pocket. I could see him touching it repeatedly, a nervous gesture that would have been funny if the contents weren't designed to destroy the man I loved. Olivia appeared at my side, resplendent in her bridesmaid dress but with her phone hidden in her bouquet, another recording device capturing every angle. "Daniel's at the altar. He looks nervous but happy. His mom is crying already. Robert keeps adjusting his tie." The image of Daniel's parents, dressed in their Sunday best, proud and emotional about their son's wedding, made my resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. They'd saved money meant for their own retirement to contribute to this day. Linda had taken time off from teaching to help with preparations. And my parents were planning to humiliate them, to suggest their son was a fraud, a user, someone unworthy of the Torres name. The music shifted to the processional. My bridesmaids filed out one by one until only Olivia remained. She gripped my hand briefly, her expression fierce. "You've got this. Whatever happens, I'm right there." Then she was gone, walking down the aisle, leaving me alone with my father who'd appeared to escort me. Vincent Torres looked distinguished in his custom tuxedo, silver hair perfectly styled, the picture of paternal pride. Anyone watching would see a successful man about to give away his beloved daughter. Only I could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he kept patting his pocket, checking the envelope that would serve as the weapon in their carefully planned assault. "Ready, sweetheart?" His voice was warm, practiced. "This is a big moment. You look just like your mother did at our wedding." The comparison made my skin crawl. I'd seen the photos of their wedding day, young Patricia in her designer gown, Vincent in his perfectly tailored suit, both of them already plotting their ascent through Riverside's social hierarchy. Their marriage had always been a business arrangement dressed in romantic language, a merger of families and fortunes that produced the expected heir and maintained the expected appearances. They'd wanted me to follow the same script. Marry someone appropriate, produce Torres grandchildren, perpetuate the cycle of superficial perfection that defined their world. Instead, I'd fallen in love with Daniel Hayes, a man who'd pulled himself through college on scholarships and determination, whose hands bore calluses from actual work, who treated his parents with genuine affection instead of obligatory tolerance. A man who'd never fit into the Torres mold, who'd never wanted to, who loved me for reasons that had nothing to do with my last name or trust fund. That was their crime. Not that Daniel was unworthy, but that he made me question whether the Torres way was the only way, whether reputation mattered more than authenticity, whether I wanted to spend my life performing for an audience that would never be satisfied. The doors opened. The guests rose. The music swelled. I took my father's arm and began the walk down the aisle, each step carrying me closer to the moment when everything would change. Daniel stood at the altar, his face transforming when he saw me, that genuine joy that had made me fall for him in the first place. His best man, his brother Marcus, stood beside him, grinning. The officiant, a kind woman who'd counseled us through the pre-marriage requirements, smiled warmly. And there, in the front row, my mother sat with her phone ready, my father's grip on my arm tight with anticipation, both of them believing they controlled what would happen next. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. I spoke my vows, meaning every word about partnership and trust and choosing each other every day. Daniel's voice cracked with emotion during his vows, promising to support my dreams, to stand beside me through challenges, to love me exactly as I was rather than who anyone expected me to be. The officiant pronounced us married. We kissed to applause and cheers, and for a moment, suspended in that perfect instant, I almost forgot what was coming. Almost believed this could just be a wedding, a celebration, a beginning rather than a battlefield. The reception hall doors opened, revealing the space transformed for dinner and dancing. Jasmine had outdone herself, every detail flawless, the ambience romantic and elegant. Guests filtered in, finding their assigned seats, commenting on the beauty of the venue. I caught Jasmine's eye across the room. She gave a subtle nod. Everything was in place. The photographer was positioned for optimal coverage. The videographer had multiple cameras running. The DJ had his instructions. And the microphone clipped inside my dress was transmitting clearly, capturing every conversation, every whispered plot, every moment of the conspiracy about to unfold. Dinner was served, an elaborate 4-course meal that my mother had insisted on, another display of Torres' wealth and taste. I barely touched my food, hyper-aware of Vincent 3 tables away, checking his watch, waiting for the precise moment in their timeline. Patricia circulated between tables during the meal, playing the gracious mother of the bride, stopping to chat with her society friends, each conversation another piece of her performance. I watched her work the room, recognizing the strategy. She was positioning allies, ensuring the right people were paying attention, setting the stage for maximum impact when Vincent delivered his surprise. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. "You okay? You've barely eaten." "I'm perfect." The lie came easily. Just overwhelmed. Happy overwhelmed. He kissed my temple, that gentle gesture that reminded me why this mattered, why exposing my parents' cruelty was worth the confrontation ahead. This man deserved to build a life free from their manipulation. His parents deserved to attend their son's wedding without being subjected to manufactured scandal. And I deserved to finally break free from the cycle of control that had defined my entire existence as Patricia and Vincent Torres's daughter. The DJ announced the first dance. Daniel and I took the floor, swaying to the song we'd chosen together, a moment of genuine connection before chaos descended. I could feel my parents watching, could see Patricia's expression shift from performance to anticipation. This was it. The moment in their plan when Vincent would interrupt, when he'd call for everyone's attention, when he'd reveal the letter and its fabricated contents. Right on cue, as the song ended, my father stood. He tapped his champagne glass, the sound cutting through the applause, commanding attention with the authority he'd spent decades cultivating. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment." His voice carried across the room, practiced and confident. "I'd like to say a few words about my daughter and her new husband." The guests settled, expecting a traditional father of the bride speech. Daniel tensed beside me, probably anticipating some embarrassing childhood story. Only I knew what was really coming, what Vincent was about to unleash, what Patricia was already recording on her phone, both of them confident this was the moment Maya Torres would finally see sense and recognize her mistake. I felt Olivia move closer, her presence a reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. Felt the weight of the microphone capturing everything. Saw Jasmine signal the photographer, the videographer, ensuring every angle was covered. Saw Uncle Carlos stand near the back, ready to intervene if needed. And I waited, heart pounding, as my father pulled the envelope from his pocket, as he opened it with theatrical precision, as he prepared to read words designed to shatter my marriage before it had truly begun. But this time, I wasn't the helpless daughter absorbing whatever cruelty they chose to inflict. This time, I knew exactly what was coming. And I was ready to turn their weapon against them. Vincent cleared his throat, all eyes on him now, the room silent with anticipation. Maya, Daniel, before we go any further with tonight's celebrations, there's something you both need to know. Something I discovered just this week that, as Maya's father, I cannot in good conscience keep hidden. He made a show of reluctance, of paternal concern, playing his role perfectly. The guests leaned forward, curious now, sensing drama. Patricia's smile was predatory, barely concealed. And Daniel, confused and innocent, looked at me with questions in his eyes that I couldn't yet answer. The trap was sprung. Now came the reversal. Vincent's voice filled the reception hall with practiced gravitas, every word calculated for maximum impact. I received some information from a private investigator I hired to ensure my daughter's future was secure. He paused, letting the words sink in, letting the guests process that he'd investigated his own son-in-law. Daniel's hand tightened around mine, confusion shifting towards something darker. What I discovered troubles me deeply. Daniel Hayes, the man my daughter just married, has been less than honest about his background. The room erupted in whispers. Patricia leaned forward in her seat, phone raised higher, capturing every nuance of what she expected would be my devastation. Daniel's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched with the effort of remaining silent. His parents sat frozen at their table, Linda's hand pressed to her mouth, Robert half rising from his chair before Marcus pulled him back down. This was the moment my parents had orchestrated so carefully. The public accusation, the manufactured evidence, the social pressure designed to force me into choosing between my family's approval and the man I just vowed to spend my life with. Vincent pulled papers from the envelope, holding them up for everyone to see. According to these records, Daniel has debts he never disclosed. Legal troubles in his past. Even questions about the legitimacy of his contracting license. He looked directly at Daniel, his expression a masterpiece of disappointed concern. Son, I think you owe my daughter and everyone here an explanation. The silence that followed was absolute. 200 guests held their breath, waiting for Daniel's response, for my reaction, for the drama to unfold exactly as Vincent and Patricia had scripted it. But I'd heard this speech already, every word of it, on that balcony recording. I knew the papers Vincent held were fabrications, manufactured by whatever investigator they'd paid to create evidence supporting their predetermined conclusion. I knew Daniel's contracting license was legitimate, his finances clean, his past free of the legal troubles they'd invented. Most importantly, I knew this wasn't about protecting me. This was about control. About punishing me for choosing love over status, authenticity over appearance, Daniel Hayes over whatever suitable Torres heir my parents had imagined for me. I stood slowly, my wedding dress rustling in the stillness. Every eye turned toward me, expecting tears or anger or the beginning of my surrender to parental pressure. Instead, I smiled. Dad, thank you for that touching display of concern. Your timing is impeccable. You've always had a gift for dramatic moments. Vincent's expression flickered with uncertainty. He'd expected devastation, not calm. Not this measured response that suggested I was in control rather than reacting to his revelation. Maya, I know this is shocking, but you need to understand what kind of man you've married. I do understand. I walked toward him, my heels clicking against the polished floor, each step deliberate. I understand that you hired someone to fabricate evidence against my husband. I understand that you and Mother have been planning this humiliation for weeks. And I understand that you're about to regret every decision you made leading to this moment. The whispers intensified. Patricia stood, her performance slipping, genuine alarm crossing her face. Maya, sit down. You're making a scene. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I turned to address the room, projecting my voice the way Patricia had taught me during years of etiquette lessons and charity event speeches. Because I have some documents of my own to share. Some recordings actually. Starting with the conversation my parents had 2 nights ago, planning every detail of what you're witnessing right now. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the sound system that Jasmine had prepared for this exact moment. The DJ booth lit up, and suddenly my mother's voice filled the reception hall, crystal clear and damning. The photographer knows exactly when to snap the pictures. Right when Vincent reads the letter. Everyone will see her face when she realizes what's happening. The effect was electric. Guests gasped. Patricia's friends turned to stare at her with expressions shifting from confusion to horror. My mother's voice continued, laying out their conspiracy in meticulous detail, discussing bribed vendors and social media strategy and the manufactured scandals they'd created to destroy Daniel's reputation. Every cruel word, every calculated move, broadcast to the very audience they'd assembled to witness my humiliation. Vincent tried to interrupt, his face flushed with rage and panic. Turn that off. This is a violation of privacy. Maya, I demand you stop this immediately. But I wasn't stopping. The recording played through to the end, including my father's weak protests about it being extreme, my mother's dismissal of his concerns, her insistence that destroying my wedding was necessary intervention to save the Torres name. When it finally ended, the silence was different than before. Not anticipation now, but shock. Disgust. 200 guests processing what they'd just heard, recalibrating everything they thought they knew about Patricia and Vincent Torres. I should mention that everything my father just said about Daniel is fabricated. I pulled up another file on my phone, projecting it onto the screen Jasmine had installed behind the head table. Daniel's actual financial records, provided with his permission once I'd finally told him everything this morning. His contractor's license, verified by the state licensing board. Background check results showing exactly nothing because there was nothing to find. Every document Vincent claimed to have was fiction, manufactured by a private investigator who specialized in creating evidence for wealthy clients willing to pay for the results they wanted. Funny thing about private investigators. I advanced to the next slide, showing bank records I'd obtained through Uncle Carlos's connections in Riverside's legal community. They keep invoices. This one shows my parents paid $30,000 for a custom investigation designed to produce specific, damaging results regardless of truth. I let that number sink in. They spent $30,000 to manufacture lies about a good man whose only crime was loving their daughter without needing their money or approval. Daniel had moved to stand beside me now, his initial shock giving way to understanding, to anger, to something like awe as he realized what I'd orchestrated. His parents remained at their table, Linda crying openly now, Robert's expression devastated that anyone would go to such lengths to hurt their family. I looked at them, these people who'd welcomed me with open hearts, and felt my resolve strengthen. But that's not even the most interesting part. Because while I was investigating my parents' conspiracy, I found other things. Things they've worked very hard to keep hidden from Riverside's social circles. Patricia moved toward me, her composure completely shattered. Maya, stop this right now. Whatever you think you know, you're making a terrible mistake. The threat in her voice was unmistakable, but threats only worked when the target was afraid. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done. The next slide showed financial records from my mother's nonprofit organization, the charitable foundation she chaired and used to maintain her position in Riverside society. Records showing donations diverted to personal accounts. Expense reports for trips that never happened. Tax fraud spanning 5 years and totaling nearly $500,000. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Patricia's society friends, the same women who'd served on boards with her, who'd attended her fundraising galas, who'd written checks to her foundation, stared at the evidence of her theft with expressions of betrayal and fury. Charitable giving was sacred in their world. Using non-profit funds for personal enrichment was unforgivable. My mother had just gone from social queen to pariah in the span of 30 seconds. But I wasn't finished. Not nearly finished. My father's business practices proved equally interesting. I advanced through slides showing Vincent Torres's construction company, the same business he'd wanted Uncle Carlos to join, the enterprise that had built the Torres fortune over 3 generations. Bribes to city officials for contract awards. Safety violations covered up with payoffs. Workers cheated out of wages through creative accounting. And most damning, the fake credentials my father had used for years, claiming engineering degrees he'd never earned, certifications he'd never obtained, expertise that was nothing but expensive letterhead and bold lies. Vincent lunged toward the sound system, trying to shut it down, but Marcus and 2 of Daniel's groomsmen blocked his path. The younger men weren't being aggressive, just standing firm, making it clear that the truth would finish playing regardless of Vincent's desperation. Uncle Carlos had moved closer to Patricia, preventing her from reaching me or the equipment. The Torres parents were trapped in the center of their own reception hall, surrounded by the witnesses they'd assembled, watching their carefully constructed reputations disintegrate in real time. There's more, of course. I kept my voice level, almost conversational. The affair my mother had 3 years ago with the country club tennis pro. The hush money my father paid when a former secretary threatened to sue for harassment. The reason my cousin Brianna's engagement really ended, spoiler alert, my mother started rumors that her fiancé was having an affair, complete with manufactured photographic evidence, all because he was a public school teacher instead of a doctor or lawyer. Every family secret, every buried scandal, every piece of leverage they'd ever used to control others, I had it documented and ready to expose. Patricia's face had gone from red to white, her hands shaking as the full scope of what I'd done became clear. You vindictive little bitch. You've destroyed us. You've destroyed your own family. I met her eyes across the reception hall, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. Not as my mother, not as the woman whose approval I'd spent 27 years chasing, but as exactly what she was. A manipulator. A fraud. Someone who'd built an empire on lies and cruelty and the suffering of anyone who didn't serve her interests. No, Mother. I destroyed the lie. The family was never real to begin with. The reception hall descended into chaos. Patricia's society friends gathered in clusters, phones out, already spreading the news through Riverside's elite networks. Vincent stood motionless, the fake evidence still clutched in his hands, his carefully maintained facade crumbled beyond repair. Several guests approached Daniel's parents, offering apologies for witnessing such cruelty, expressing admiration for their son. Linda Hayes accepted their condolences with grace while Robert kept his arm around her shoulders, protective and steady. Jasmine appeared at my side with a tablet. The videographer captured everything. Multiple angles, perfect audio. I've already sent copies to your secure storage. She glanced at my parents with something like satisfaction. Also, the vendors they tried to bribe? Every one of them has agreed to provide statements about the attempted corruption. The Riverside business community doesn't take kindly to people weaponizing their services. I thanked her, watching as Uncle Carlos escorted my parents toward the exit. They weren't leaving by choice. Several guests had already mentioned calling the authorities about the financial fraud displayed so publicly. Vincent's fake credentials alone would trigger professional investigations. Patricia's nonprofit theft guaranteed criminal charges. Daniel pulled me into his arms, his voice rough with emotion. You knew all of this. You've been carrying this for days. Why didn't you tell me? Because you needed to be genuinely surprised. If you'd known what was coming, they would have seen it on your face. They would have adjusted their plan, might have attacked differently, might have waited for another opportunity when we weren't prepared. I looked up at him, this good man who'd done nothing wrong except love me without requiring me to be perfect. I needed your authentic reaction to make their cruelty undeniable. I'm sorry I kept you in the dark. I'm sorry your parents had to hear those lies, even for a moment. He kissed my forehead, the gesture achingly familiar. My parents have spent their whole lives dealing with people who thought they weren't good enough. They're strong. They'll be okay. He pulled back to look at me properly. But are you okay? Those were your parents. Whatever they did, however they treated you, this has to hurt. It did hurt. Hurt in ways I was only beginning to process. The recordings had proven what I'd always suspected but never wanted to confirm. That my parents loved their reputation more than their daughter. That their affection was transactional, conditional on my compliance with their vision of who I should be. That every childhood memory I treasured was tainted by the calculation beneath their performance of parenthood. But the hurt was clean somehow. Not the festering wound of doubt and self-blame I'd carried for years, wondering why I could never quite earn their approval, never quite measure up to their standards. Now I knew. The problem had never been me. The problem was that they'd built their entire existence on artifice and control, and I'd committed the unforgivable sin of wanting something real. Olivia appeared with champagne, pressing glasses into our hands. To burning down toxic family trees. May the ashes fertilize better growth. We drank, and I felt something shift. The weight I'd been carrying since that night on the balcony, maybe longer, finally lifting. The guests who remained, about half had quietly departed once the drama concluded, gathered around us with genuine warmth. These weren't Patricia's carefully curated society friends. These were people who'd come for Daniel and me, who cared about our happiness more than social positioning. They raised their glasses, toasted our marriage, promised support as we navigated whatever came next. Daniel's brother Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Well, you definitely married into an interesting family. Daniel laughed, the sound slightly unsteady but real. I married out of it, actually. I think that was the whole point. The evening transformed into something unexpected. With my parents gone and their conspirators either departed or chastened into silence, the reception became the celebration I'd originally imagined. The DJ played our requested songs instead of following Vincent's timeline. We danced without performance, without strategy, just moved together surrounded by people who wanted us to succeed. Daniel's parents joined us on the dance floor, Linda's earlier tears replaced by fierce pride in her son. She hugged me tight, whispering that I was brave, that I'd protected their family, that they were honored to call me daughter. Uncle Carlos found me during a slow song, asked permission to cut in. Daniel graciously stepped aside, and I danced with the man who'd always represented the road not taken in the Torres family. The choice to value substance over style, authenticity over advantage. You did good tonight, Mija. Patricia and Vincent needed to face consequences. They've hurt too many people for too long. But I worry about the cost to you. What happens when the adrenaline fades and you're left processing that your parents tried to destroy your wedding? I'd been wondering the same thing. Probably therapy. Lots of therapy. And distance. Daniel and I are moving to Portland next month. His company offered him a position managing their Northwest expansion. Fresh start, new city, somewhere the Torres name doesn't carry weight. He nodded approval. Your grandmother Elena called me earlier. She saw some of the video already circulating online. Asked me to tell you she's proud of you. Said Patricia needed someone to stand up to her for 40 years, and she's glad you finally did it. My grandmother, Patricia's mother, had always been a complicated presence. Elegant and sharp, occasionally kind but mostly distant. Learning she approved of my rebellion against her daughter felt simultaneously validating and strange. She wants to meet for lunch before you leave for Portland. Says there are things you should know about the Torres family history. Patterns that repeat. She thinks you might be the one to finally break the cycle. The reception wound down around midnight. Jasmine's team handled cleanup while Daniel and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon suite at the hotel. Several guests stopped us on the way out, pressing envelopes into our hands, extra gifts they said, contributions to help us start fresh in Portland. One envelope contained a note from a woman I barely knew, one of Patricia's former nonprofit board members. Thank you for exposing the truth. I suspected financial irregularities but had no proof. The authorities will be very interested in the evidence you've provided. Your courage helps all of us. In the quiet of our suite, Daniel and I finally had space to process what had happened. He held me while I cried, releasing the tension and fear and grief I'd been suppressing for days. Cried for the parents I'd wanted but never truly had. For the childhood I'd believed in until evidence proved otherwise. For the loss of illusions I'd clung to despite mounting proof they were false. When the tears subsided, Daniel asked the question I'd been avoiding. What happens now? To your parents, I mean. Legally? The financial fraud alone will trigger investigations. Patricia's nonprofit theft is federal jurisdiction. Vincent's fake credentials violate professional licensing laws and probably constitute fraud in every contract he signed using those credentials. Uncle Carlos connected me with prosecutors who specialize in white-collar crime. They're already building cases. I took a shaky breath. My parents will likely face criminal charges. Possibly prison time. Definitely financial ruin once the lawsuits start. Every person they defrauded, every contract secured through false pretenses, every donor to Patricia's nonprofit, they'll all have grounds to sue. And you're okay with that? Daniel's question wasn't judgmental, just seeking to understand. I thought about it seriously. Was I okay with my parents potentially going to prison? With dismantling their lives as thoroughly as they'd tried to dismantle mine? With becoming the daughter who destroyed the Torres family legacy? Yes. I'm okay with it. Not because I want revenge, though I'd be lying if I said some part of me doesn't feel satisfaction. But because letting them continue would mean more victims. More young couples sabotaged. More people crushed under the weight of Torres family control. More years of cruelty disguised as concern. I met Daniel's eyes. They taught me that sometimes you have to burn everything down to stop the spread of rot. I'm just applying their lesson. We left for our honeymoon the next morning, flying to the coast for the beach vacation I'd planned months ago with my book club, now repurposed as a honeymoon with Daniel. My phone exploded with messages during the flight. News outlets requesting interviews about the society wedding turned expose. Lawyers representing my parents demanding I cease sharing private information. Former family friends expressing shock and support in equal measure. And one message from my mother, brief and venomous. You've chosen your side. Don't expect forgiveness. I blocked her number and turned off my phone. The beach house waited, peaceful and far from Riverside's drama. Daniel and I spent a week disconnected from everything except each other, processing the earthquake that had struck our wedding day, planning our move to Portland, imagining futures free from Torres family interference. We talked about the children we might have someday, raising them with Daniel's parents' values instead of my parents' poison. We made love and cooked meals and walked on the sand and slowly, gradually, began to heal. When we returned to Riverside to pack for the move, the fallout was extensive. Federal investigators had raided Patricia's nonprofit offices. The state licensing board had suspended Vincent's credentials pending investigation. Multiple former employees and business partners had come forward with additional accusations. The Torres estate was listed for sale, assets being liquidated to cover mounting legal fees. Uncle Carlos reported that my parents had hired separate attorneys, each apparently willing to testify against the other for reduced sentences. Even their marriage, that decades-long performance of partnership, was crumbling under pressure. Brianna called to thank me, her voice thick with emotion. You did what I couldn't. What so many of us couldn't. Patricia destroyed my engagement, my relationship with someone I loved, and I just accepted it. Thought maybe I deserved it somehow. Seeing her exposed, seeing everyone finally understand what she is, it helps. It doesn't undo the damage, but it helps. We made plans to meet in Portland, to build the cousin relationship we'd never been allowed to have under Patricia's divisive rule. To support each other through the complicated grief of losing parents who'd never really been present in healthy ways. The moving truck pulled away from my Riverside apartment on a gray morning in late autumn. Daniel drove while I watched the city disappear in the side mirror. Somewhere behind us, my parents were facing consequences for decades of cruelty. Somewhere ahead, Portland waited with opportunities and anonymity and the chance to build something genuine. My phone buzzed with a final message from grandmother Elena. She'd sent a photo of herself as a young woman, standing up to her own domineering mother, breaking free from expectations that would have crushed her spirit. The caption read simply, "The Torah's women who survive are the ones brave enough to walk away. Welcome to the club." I showed Daniel the photo. He squeezed my hand, his touch grounding me in the present, in the choice I'd made, in the life we were building together. My name was Maya Torres. Soon it would be Maya Hayes. And this was the story of how I turned my parents' plot into their reckoning, how I chose truth over performance, how I walked away from a toxic legacy to build something better. The recording devices were packed away now, evidence preserved but no longer needed. The wedding that was meant to humiliate me had become the event that freed me. And the road ahead stretched open, full of possibilities my parents had tried to deny but could no longer touch. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.